Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. In this video I will show you how to bake a texture atlas and also effectively work with a large number of objects in your scene that you are going to export to Unity 3D. As you can see, I have two objects here which I called HP and LP. The LP model, as you can see, does not yet have any materials at all. But here I have already made the final UV for all the elements that are included here. And there are also no overlays. I mean, the UV elements do not lie on top of each other, but each takes its own individual place. HP is a model that has a large number of materials and textures, which can be easily changed at will. This model has UVs for each individual object. From this object in the future, we will transfer all textures into one atlas. Let's get started. First, we need to enable the display of polygon orientation for LP to make sure that our 3D model does not have polygons turned inward. To do this, select the flipped polygons and press Alt-N and select Flip. It makes sense to do the same for the HP model. For a more convenient perception of the 3D model without materials, you can make the following settings. But this only works in solid render mode. Next, we need to add one material for the LP model and create an empty texture in 4K resolution, since the texture from the HP model will be baked here. Next, we need to go to the Render Settings tab. Select Cycles as Render Engine. Since we only need a diffuse map, select Diffuse from the list. And uncheck the boxes so that light is not baked into the texture. Here you need to set the maximum distance from which the texture will be projected without creating artifacts. There may be a different number for you. Next, the final step, we need to select HP. Hold down the Control key and then select LP. Thus, we marked HP as selected and LP as active, so that rendering occurs from the selected object to the active object. As you saw in the checkbox below, press the Bake button and wait until the progress bar reaches 100%. If you did something wrong, you will see an error in the location of the progress bar. But if everything went well, you will see the texture in the window on the left, or on the model itself, where we created an empty texture. Let's save the texture so it doesn't get lost. If your object has problems with smoothing groups, they can be corrected automatically. To do this, select an object, then right-click and select Shade Auto Smooth from the list. The parameter for automatic smoothing comes from here, so configure it as you like. To save texture space, I made the base for these stands the same, so now I'm just duplicating their geometry. Now I divide the common object into separate objects so that the user can use them separately to fill the game scene. To do this, in Edit mode, I select the geometry of each object and press the P key. Now we need to set up the pivots of all objects, since for now they are in the same place for all objects. To do this, you need to enable origins. Next, select all objects and right-click. Select Origin to Geometry from the list, which will shift the pivots for all objects relative to the center of their geometry. To have a little more options when working with pivots, you can enable the add-in in the Preferences tab. Then in the add-ins section, you need to find an add-in called Pi Menus and activate it. Now if we select one of the objects and press the combination Control key Alt-X, a menu will appear where we can select where to put the pivot. This can be done manually, but it will take a little longer. For the rest of the objects, we will leave the pivots in the center, since there is no need to move them anywhere. But for this to work well in Unity, we need to rotate the pivots in a certain way. Y is up, Z is forward, X to the left or to the right. In order for the pivots to rotate individually for each object, press the dot key and select individual origins from the menu. Now, in order to rotate the pivots, you must first press the hotkey R. When rotation is activated, we need to select the axis along which we want to rotate the pivot. To do this, press one of the three keys X or Y or Z. When rotation occurs along one of the axes, by pressing the Control key we activate snapping so that the rotation occurs with sticking of several degrees. Press the keys one at a time, no need to press all three keys at once. After you are finished editing the pivot, you need to uncheck origins so as not to accidentally move it. If there is a lot of unnecessary stuff left in your scene that you would like to remove, you can go to the Orphan Data menu and see how much unused content that can be deleted using this button or manually. I deleted everything that was in this tab. There is another way to remove unnecessary things from a scene, but this applies to unnecessary materials in objects. Let's switch to the HP object, and I'll show you what I mean. First, let's divide it into separate ones as we did with the LP object, since sometimes there is a need to bake a texture from several objects to one. Now, if you open the Materials tab, you will see that each individual object has a full set of materials that it had before the division. But in reality, now each object has approximately 1 to 4 materials that are used, and the rest is garbage that will be inconvenient to work with. You can remove unused materials using the button on the right, Remove Unused Slots. But doing this for each object is again very inconvenient and time-consuming. To apply this action to several objects, select all objects and apply Remove Unused Material Slots. As you can see, everything unnecessary has been removed. The next step is naming all objects. Since renaming each object manually is very time-consuming, we will use Bath Rename. To set a new name for all selected objects, select Set Name. Now all objects have more clear naming. To make the names a little shorter and remove unnecessary characters, you can do this. Thus, we removed a couple of unnecessary characters from the name, since too long names sometimes create problems in work. Now we need to export the FBX file to Unity and make the following settings so that the scale of objects is appropriate. We also don't have animation, so uncheck the box. Now open Unity. Create a new folder there for ease of work and import the FBX file and texture. That's all we need, just 2 files. We also create one new material in Unity to assign our texture to it. To assign one material to several objects at once, I selected all objects in Unity and assigned it in the Material tab. All the hardest work is behind us, and all we have to do is mark all objects as static, add collisions, and make prefabs for all these objects. So that the sources would be in a separate folder, I created a source folder and put the FBX texture and material file there. Also, in the settings for importing object geometry, I unchecked the boxes next to importing animation and materials so that this would not cause problems in the future, but we don't have animation at all. Since collisions are needed for only a few objects, select these objects and assign the simplest collision in the form of a box. For other objects, add collisions as you wish. Since the fewer complex collisions, the higher the FPS in the game. The collision can also be edited if necessary so that the player does not crash into the air. After you have done everything necessary with the objects, you need to pack them into prefabs. To do this, simply drag them into the window at the bottom. So that all objects are located in 0 coordinates, select all the prefabs that we made and write 0 everywhere in these fields, except for scale. As you can see, if we drag objects into the scene, they appear next to the cursor. Also, another very important detail, if you are going to use these objects in scenes where you are going to bake the light, we need to create a second UV map. Now our objects are completely ready for use in your projects. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.